Right outside your window, there's a multi-million-dollar high-rise going up. You see the progress.
Oh, absolutely. You see the cranes everywhere.
Exactly. You see the concrete being poured, the glass panels, sliding into place. The floors are just getting stacked week by week. It looks incredibly systematic.
It does. It looks like a perfectly choreographed dance.
Almost inevitable, Em.
Hmm.
But what you are not seeing is the sheer, unadulterated chaos that is barely contained behind those chain link fences.
Barely contained is definitely the right phrase for it.
Right. You don't see the 100 different ways that entire structure could just financially and physically collapse into absolute ruin on any given Tuesday. We just look at it and assume someone, somewhere has it all perfectly under control.
And that assumption is usually doing a lot of heavy lifting.
10%. So today, we are opening up the personal notebooks, the hard-won insights of a veteran construction manager. We're talking about someone with 3 solid decades of boots-on-the-ground experience running massive commercial builds.
Right, someone who has actually lived through the chaos.
Exactly. And our mission for this deep dive today, it isn't just to talk about the physical bricks and mortar. We are examining the invisible scaffolding that actually keeps these projects from completely going for a toss.
Which is such a great way to visualize it.
Yeah. And that scaffolding is risk management.
It really is. It is the unseen foundation of every successful build in the world. And what makes this veteran manager's notes so compelling is their central thesis.
Which is what, exactly?
Basically, in the world of high-space construction, uncertainties are not just possibilities that you might occasionally encounter, they are absolute guarantees.
Guarantees. So it's not if things go wrong, it's when.
Precisely. The framework we are exploring today posits that rigorous, unyielding risk management is the single defining factor. It's the only thing separating a project that actually hands over the keys from one that spirals into a catastrophic financial and physical disaster. It is not an administrative afterthought, It is the core competency of building anything at scale.
Okay, so if we want to understand how a 30-year veteran navigates this daily minefield, we first have to categorize the explosives. We need to dissect the anatomy of these risks.
Right. You have to know what you're fighting.
And the author starts by clubbing together the 2 most immediate threats that hit the project site every single day. Basically, financial risks and operational risks.
The money and the men.
The money and the men. If either of those arteries get severed, the project bleeds out fast. So let's look at the financial side first, because the author uses the recent pandemic as the ultimate stress test for material costs.
It really is a perfect case study in cascading financial failure.
See, the notes highlight how the supply chains for raw materials, and we're specifically talking about structural steel, your commercial-grade cement, your lumber, they just went completely haywire globally.
Unprecedented volatility.
Right. And the author points out a scenario where a construction project that had its budget fully locked and approved suddenly saw its core material costs spike by 30% or more.
Which is just staggering.
It is. Now, a 30% hike on your weekly grocery bill is annoying, right?
Yeah.
But on a $50 million commercial build, that instantly evaporates your profitability.
To understand the gravity of that spike, we really have to look at the underlying economics of the construction industry. Because the mechanics of commercial development operate on incredibly tight profit margins.
How tight are we talking?
Well, when a general contractor wins a bid for a major project, they're often operating on a net profit margin of perhaps 5 to 8%.
Wait, only 5 to 8%? That's nothing.
It's a volume business. So when your primary structural inputs, which make up a massive chunk of your total overhead, when they suddenly cost 30% more, you are not just taking a haircut on your profits.
That margin is just gone.
Obliterated instantly. And the project plunges deep into the red. You are suddenly looking at a multi-million-dollar deficit that the real estate developer and the institutional banks backing them, they never agreed to fund that.
Which means the money stops flowing, the workers don't get paid, and the cranes just stop moving.
Exactly. Everything halts.
But obviously, you can't just freeze a half-built skyscraper for 2 years waiting for steel prices to come down, Nara. The interest payments alone would bankrupt you.
You'd be insolvent in months.
So what is the mechanical solution here? How does a veteran manager insulate a razor-thin margin from a wildly fluctuating global commodities market?
Well, the primary mechanism the author details is the strategic use of forward contracts. And this is heavily supplemented by deeply entrenched long-term supplier relationships.
Okay, break down a forward contract for us.
Right. A forward contract is basically a customized legal agreement between the contractor and supplier to buy or sell an asset, in this case, raw materials like steel or lumber, at a specifically predetermined price on a specific future date.
So locking it in early.
Yes. So if you are breaking ground today, but you know you need, say, 500 tons of steel for the framing phase in 8 months, you execute a forward contract now.
Ah, I see.
If the global market price of steel doubles between now and month 8, you are legally protected. The supplier is obligated to deliver the steel at the price you locked in today.
I understand the defensive posture there, I really do. But if I am putting on my business owner hat, I have to challenge this logic a bit.
Sure. What's the concern?
Let's say I lock in my forward contract for that steel today at what I think is a fair price. But then 8 months from now, the supply chain bottlenecks actually clear up and the global market price of steel plummets by 20%.
Right, a massive price drop.
Yeah. I am now legally bound to pay a massive premium over the current street value. I have burned a massive amount of cash that could have been pure profit. In a low-margin business, doesn't that opportunity cost sting?
Oh, it absolutely stings. But what's fascinating here is that this highlights a fundamental misunderstanding of what risk management actually is in this context.
Hmm.
Well, you are looking at the scenario through the lens of an equity trader, trying to maximize upside and capture alpha.
Fair point.
But a seasoned construction manager is entirely focused on minimizing downside. In the context of a massive multi-year build, financial predictability is infinitely more valuable than a potential bargain.
Because the bargain is just a bonus, but the predictability is survival.
Exactly. Budget certainty is the absolute bedrock of project viability. When you lock in the price of steel and the market subsequently drops, yes, you technically overpaid relative to the new market reality.
Right.
However, your budget remains perfectly intact. That 5 to 8% profit margin that you promised your stakeholders and that your entire financial model is built upon, it's still exactly what you calculated.
So the project lives to see another day.
It does. Conversely, if you float the market price and it spikes 30%, the project suffers a catastrophic failure. The risk of total project insolvency far outweighs the opportunity cost of missing out on a market dip.
You aren't just buying steel. You are buying certainty.
That's exactly right.
That makes a lot of sense. You are essentially neutralizing the volatility of the outside world so you can actually control the variables inside your fence.
That's a great way to put it.
So that protects the money. But the money is completely useless if the men aren't doing the work. This brings us to the operational risks. The notes specifically zero in on subcontractor delays, which just seems like an inevitable headache.
It is. It is the exact point where the pristine theoretical Gantt charts drawn up in the office collide with the messy, unpredictable reality of human labor.
And the author provides a very grounded example here. Imagine your designated plumbing subcontractor fails to hit their milestones because they simply cannot source enough skilled laborers to show up to the site.
A very common occurrence, unfortunately.
Right. And to an outsider, you might think, okay, fine, the pipes are a week late. Just start shifting the interior decorators to a different floor, do the needful, and keep moving.
But you can't do that.
Exactly. The notes emphatically warn against this kind of thinking. They stress the cascading effect on the master timeline. And reading this, I instantly thought of the traffic in Mumbai or Bangalore.
Oh, how do you mean?
Think about a highly congested, sequential traffic system. It's like one auto rickshaw breaking down in the middle of a narrow, single-lane flyover.
Okay, I can picture that.
Just one tiny vehicle. But because the road is narrow, the massive buses behind it can't pass. Then the cars back up. The two-wheelers try to squeeze through the gaps, but they get tangled up.
A total bottleneck.
Total bottleneck. Within 15 minutes, an arterial road that feeds half the city is completely gridlocked. The entire ecosystem grinds to a halt, all because a spark plug failed on one single rickshaw.
That is actually a highly accurate representation of the critical path method in construction scheduling.
Really?
Yes, because construction is not a parallel process.
Yeah.
It is strictly sequential and deeply interdependent.
You have to do step A before step B.
Exactly. You cannot install the interior drywall until the electrical conduit and the plumbing lines are fully inspected and sealed inside the wall cavities. You cannot paint the drywall until it has been taped and mudded.
Right.
So if your plumbing contractor is short-staffed and runs 3 weeks behind, your drywall crew is forcefully pushed back 3 weeks.
And they aren't just going to wait around.
Exactly. Your drywall subcontractor has other lucrative jobs booked months in advance, so they cannot just sit idle for 3 weeks. They pull their crew off your site entirely.
Oh, wow.
Now, getting them back might take 6 weeks. The painters are subsequently delayed, the flooring is delayed, and suddenly your entire master schedule has structurally collapsed because of a localized labor shortage in one plumbing crew.
It is a terrifying domino effect. So if you are the general contractor, how do you prevent the rickshaw from breaking down on your specific flyover? I mean, you don't manage the plumber's payroll, so you can't force their guys to show up.
You cannot manage their payroll, no.
Oh.
But you can heavily manipulate their risk calculus through aggressive contract architecture.
Okay, tell me more about that.
The mitigation strategy detailed here relies on establishing crystal clear performance metrics tethered to strict liquidated damages clauses in the subcontractor agreements.
Liquidated damages, meaning financial penalties written into the contract. If they're late, they bleed money.
Precisely. It is a mechanism of accountability that fundamentally alters the psychology of the subcontractor.
How so?
Well, if a specialized plumbing outfit is struggling with a severe labor shortage and they have to allocate their limited workforce for the week, they will look at their active jobs.
Right, they have to prioritize.
Exactly. If Job A has a standard contract with vague delivery dates and your project Job B has a legally binding clause stating they forfeit $5,000 for every single day they delay the critical path,
Oh, I see where this is going.
they are going to dispatch their absolute best crews to your site immediately. You are effectively shifting the operational risk away from the general contractor and forcing it back onto the shoulders of the subcontractor where the liability actually belongs.
You are creating a scenario where it is far more painful for them to fail you than to fail anyone else.
It sounds a bit ruthless, but it's necessary.
No, it is a bit ruthless, but when millions are on the line, doing the needful means protecting your critical path at all costs.
Absolutely.
So we have built a fortress around our budget with forward contracts, and we have disciplined our operational schedule with penalty clauses.
The internal variables are secure.
Right, but the author argues that these internal variables are only half the battle, because eventually you have to deal with the outside world, the uncontrollables.
The external threats.
Yes. We are shifting from risks we can write into a spreadsheet to things we absolutely cannot negotiate with. Gravity, bureaucracy, and the weather.
And this transition is really where a standard project manager differentiates themselves from an elite construction manager. You are moving from basic administrative defense to high-stakes, proactive crisis prevention.
And nothing is higher stakes than human life.
No.
The author addresses the safety risks head-on, acknowledging the grim reality that construction sites are inherently dangerous environments. We are talking about heavy machinery, high voltage, and immense heights.
It's a high-risk ecosystem.
And the notes cite a specific, rather sobering statistic from OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. They report that falls account for nearly 40% of all construction worker fatalities. 40%. It is a massive vulnerability.
It is a profound human tragedy, first and foremost. But from a project management perspective, it also illustrates why safety risk management is not merely a regulatory checkbox.
It's survival.
It is the most critical operational imperative on the site. A major safety incident not only destroys lives, but it triggers immediate work stoppages, massive governmental investigations, severe legal liabilities, and devastating reputational damage.
And what struck me about the author's approach here is that they don't just rely on the traditional methods. We all know about mandatory morning safety briefings or hanging up warning posters.
Right, the standard protocol.
But the mitigation strategy here goes much deeper into the mechanics of modern safety. They pair rigorous, continuous safety training with the deployment of cutting-edge technology, specifically highlighting advanced wearable PPEs, personal protective equipment.
This is where the industry is seeing a massive technological leap. We are no longer just talking about hard hats and high-visibility vests. The risk management frontier is now heavily digitized.
Right, but how exactly does a piece of technology prevent gravity from doing its job? Are we talking about, like, a smartwatch that just tracks steps, or is it more integrated than that?
Oh, it is vastly more integrated. The notes refer to the implementation of smart harnesses and biometric wearables that operate on low-energy Bluetooth mesh networks across the job site.
Okay, color me intrigued.
Let's look at the mechanics of fall prevention. A traditional safety harness only works if the worker actively remembers to clip their lanyard into a secure anchor point.
Which relies entirely on human memory.
Exactly. A smart harness, however, contains localized sensors. If a worker approaches a leading edge, say, an unfinished elevator shaft or an open balcony, without being properly clipped in, the wearable can detect their proximity to the hazard.
And what does it do?
It immediately triggers a localized haptic warning, literally buzzing against their skin. Simultaneously, it sends an instant alert to the site's safety manager's dashboard, notifying them that a specific worker in Zone 4 is unclipped near a drop-off.
Oh, wow. That is incredible. It changes the dynamic completely. You aren't just investigating a fall after it happens. You are actively intercepting the behavioral failure before the physics even take over.
Exactly. And what's fascinating here is the sensors go beyond just fall protection.
What else do they monitor?
They monitor ambient environmental hazards,
Mm.
like dangerous spikes in carbon monoxide in closed basement pores or extreme heat indexes, monitoring the worker's vital signs for heat stroke before the worker even realizes they are dehydrated.
That's brilliant.
But the author makes a vital point here. The technology is completely useless without the underlying training culture.
Because they'll just take it off.
Right. If workers feel the tech is just a surveillance tool to punish them, they will find ways to disable it. The training must explicitly connect the mechanics of the wearable to their personal survival, ensuring they understand that clipping into the safety line is what guarantees they go home to their families.
It is about building a culture where the tech is viewed as a shield, not a leash.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've mitigated the risks of the physical environment. But what happens when the very ground you are building on is suddenly subjected to a different set of rules?
Regulatory risks.
Yes, this brings us to regulatory risks.
Hmm.
And the author outlines a scenario that honestly made me shake my head. They detail a case where a local city council decided to change its zoning laws mid-project.
It happens more often than you'd think.
But the building is already permitted, the foundation is poured, and suddenly the city changes the rules, forces the contractor to halt all construction, and demands they completely reapply for a new set of permits.
It is a bureaucratic nightmare that can bleed a project dry through sheer attrition.
But logically, how is that even legally permissible? Changing the rules of the game after the match has officially started, you have legally binding permits.
I know, it's frustrating.
How can a municipality just wake up one morning, decide they don't like the height of your building anymore, and demand you stop pouring concrete?
It seems like a fundamental breach of contract, doesn't it? But it speaks to the immense localized power of municipal governance. You really have to look at the mechanics of local politics.
Okay, walk me through it.
City councils and zoning boards are subject to shifting political winds. Perhaps a recent local election ushered in a new administration running on a strict, anti-density, slow-growth platform.
Right.
Yeah.
New politicians want to make a statement.
Exactly. Or perhaps a highly organized neighborhood coalition, a NIMBY group, not in my backyard, suddenly petitioned the city, discovering a minor, previously overlooked technicality in the environmental impact report you filed 3 years ago.
Just a technicality and they can shut you down.
The city, possessing ultimate authority over land use, can issue a stop work order while that technicality is reviewed. And a halted site is a massive financial hemorrhage.
Because your costs don't start.
Never. You are still paying daily rental fees on your tower cranes. You are paying for site security. You are servicing the interest on massive construction loans, but your progress is zero.
It's the equivalent of paying premium rent on a luxury apartment while the landlord changes the locks and refuses to give you the new key. It's maddening.
It really is.
So, as a project manager, you obviously cannot control the whims of local politicians. What is the author's blueprint for surviving this?
Well, the author specifically warns against the amateur mistake of treating legal counsel as a one-time transaction.
What do you mean?
A lot of developers hire a lawyer at the genesis of the project to secure the initial permits, and then they put the lawyer's number in a drawer, assuming the legal work is done.
Right. We got the permit. We're good.
Exactly. But the mitigation strategy detailed in the notes is the implementation of a continuous legal radar. You must regularly consult with municipal legal experts and political consultants throughout the entire life cycle of the build.
So they aren't just drafting contracts. They are actively monitoring the environment.
Correct. You have your legal team constantly scanning the horizon for subtle political shifts. They're reading the minutes of the local zoning board meetings. They are monitoring proposed ordinances. They are tracking the mood of the community board.
Looking for storm clouds.
Precisely. If they spot a proposed rule change that might impact your building's facade requirements, you don't wait for the law to pass and halt your site. You proactively engage the city planners.
You get ahead of it.
Yes. Perhaps you lobby for a grandfather clause, or you immediately adapt your architectural plans before the city issues a mandate. Anticipatory compliance is really the only way to outmaneuver bureaucratic gridlock.
Anticipatory compliance. I like that. You are reading the weather of the political climate, which is actually a perfect pivot to the final and perhaps most volatile, uncontrollable risk. The actual weather.
Environmental risks. Mother Nature herself.
The ultimate undefeated wild card of construction.
Truly.
%. The notes discuss how unforeseen weather anomalies can induce massive, devastating delays. They use the example of an unexpected torrential downpour hitting a site right during a critical earthworks phase.
A nightmare scenario.
Yes. It leads to massive site flooding, which fundamentally destroys the work already completed, necessitating severe rework and driving up massive time and cost overruns. And growing up with the Indian monsoon season, this resonates so deeply.
I can imagine.
You understand how wildly unpredictable it can be. You could have a morning of absolute blazing sunshine, and by 2 p.m., the sky breaks open and your entire street is completely submerged in 2 feet of water.
Just out of nowhere.
Right. If you are a contractor trying to pour a massive concrete foundation or excavating a 3-story basement parking garage, a flash flood doesn't just push the schedule back a day, it actively annihilates the physical labor you just paid for.
And you touched on the exact concept that terrifies project managers. Rework.
Right, doing it over.
In the economic model of construction, rework is an absolute margin killer.
Because you are literally paying twice for the exact same physical milestone.
You are paying multiple times, actually. Let's look at the mechanics of your flooded basement example. You paid an excavation crew for 2 weeks to dig a massive trench. The storm hits, floods the excavation, and the water pressure collapses the structural retaining walls of the trench.
Okay, so it's ruined.
Right. Now, you cannot just resume work. You have to pay a specialized crew to bring in industrial pumps to remove the water. Then you have to pay a geotechnical engineer to reassess the compromised soil stability.
Even more money.
Then you have to pay your excavation crew to redig the exact same trench and pay for new retaining walls.
Oh.
You have lost 3 weeks of time and effectively tripled your labor costs for a single line item on your budget.
It's just devastating. So how does a veteran, someone who has survived 30 years of this, fight the weather? I mean, you can't put a tarp over a skyscraper.
No, you cannot control the weather, but you can build a schedule that absorbs it. The author details 2 highly specific layers of mitigation here. First, they abandon generic weather tracking.
Meaning what?
Elite sites integrate highly advanced, localized meteorological services into their daily planning. They aren't just looking at a smartphone weather app. They're using predictive microclimate forecasting.
Oh, wow.
Yes, to understand precise precipitation windows down to the hour, which dictates whether they authorize a massive concrete pour.
That is incredibly granular.
It is. But the second, and far more structural mitigation, is the concept of schedule float, or baking contingency days directly into the master timeline.
Okay, I want to dig into that. Contingency days. By building a schedule that expects delays, aren't you essentially planning to fail? Doesn't that invite a lack of urgency from your crews?
It is not planning to fail. It is architecting a schedule rooted in empirical reality rather than dangerous optimism.
Explain the math on that.
Let's look at it. If historical meteorological data shows that the city experiences an average of 12 days of heavy rain in the month of July, it is a dereliction of duty to build a construction schedule that assumes 30 consecutive days of uninterrupted sunshine.
That makes sense.
You build a schedule that maps out 20 days of actual production. If the weather's unseasonably dry and you finish early, you have achieved a massive win.
A nice bonus.
Exactly. But if it rains for exactly 12 days, your project timeline does not shift a single millimeter. You have mathematically insulated the master schedule from the climate.
Okay, let's step back and look at what we've unpacked so far, because the sheer density of threats is just staggering. We have seen how a multi-million-dollar project can be systematically dismantled by a 30% spike in global steel prices.
Right.
A localized labor shortage with a plumbing crew, a tragic failure of an unclipped safety harness, a capricious vote by a local zoning board, or a sudden afternoon flash flood. It is a miracle anything gets built at all.
It truly is a daily battle against entropy.
But here is where the author's notes take a really fascinating turn. Once we fully comprehend the terrifying scope of what can go wrong, the paradigm shifts entirely.
We move from defense to offense.
Yes, we transition from playing defense to playing offense. The author argues that risk management, when executed at the highest level, is not just about avoiding failure. It is actually a superpower that proactively creates tangible business value.
And this is perhaps the most critical conceptual shift in the entire text.
Yeah.
In many corporate cultures, risk management is viewed as a necessary evil.
Oh, 100%. Just red tape.
Exactly. It's seen as a cost center, a bureaucratic drag on production, handled by a compliance officer with a clipboard. But this veteran manager completely reframes it.
How so?
When risk management is deeply integrated into the operational DNA of a company, it ceases to be an administrative burden and transforms into a massive competitive advantage.
Let's break down exactly how it creates that value. The first core argument the author makes is that it fundamentally enhances strategic decision-making and optimizes resource allocation.
Yes.
The notes detail how a deeply structured risk management protocol generates a wealth of historical data. So, returning to our operational risks, a project manager doesn't just have to guess if a subcontractor is reliable.
Right, no guessing.
They can consult the historical data in their risk registry to actively avoid repeating past mistakes.
Exactly. It replaces anecdotal intuition with actionable empirical intelligence. In a disorganized firm, a superintendent might have a vague gut feeling that a specific electrical subcontractor is generally a bit slow.
Just a vibe.
It's the vibe, yeah. But in a firm with rigorous risk management, that feeling is quantified. The data shows that across the last 4 projects, this specific electrical outfit was delayed by an average of 8.4 days due to supply chain mismanagement.
Oh, that is specific.
That hard data dictates your procurement strategy today. You either demand strict penalty clauses or you award the bid to a slightly more expensive but statistically more reliable competitor. You are making decisions based on probability, not guesswork.
And it allows for incredibly aggressive resource allocation. The author provides a brilliant example here regarding materials supply chains.
Stockpiling strategy.
Right. If your continuous risk assessment identifies a high probability of an upcoming macroeconomic disruption, say, your analysts predict a major dockworkers strike at a critical regional port in the next quarter.
You see the threat on the horizon.
Exactly. You do not wait for the strike to happen to see how it affects your cement deliveries. The project manager plays offense by proactively stockpiling critical materials.
You buy it before you need it.
You pre-order and warehouse the necessary lumber, steel, or cement months in advance. Yes, you incur some warehousing costs, but when the strike hits and your competitor sites grind to a halt because they run out of materials, your project continues seamlessly. You have weaponized foresight to guarantee continuity.
It is the strategic abandonment of just-in-time inventory in favor of just-in-case resilience. And what's fascinating here is the value creation extends far beyond the logistics of the physical site.
Or else does it reach?
It profoundly impacts the financial architecture of the project through stakeholder confidence.
This was a standout point for me. The author states that presenting a meticulously detailed, comprehensive risk management plan to institutional investors and lenders during the pre-construction phase of a high-profile commercial build can actually unlock additional funding and secure better loan terms.
It actively instills deep confidence in the project's viability.
Right. And you know what it reminds me of? It is a lot like a commercial airline pilot interacting with air traffic control. If a pilot just radios ATC and says, "Hey, we are going to take off and head towards London. We will figure out the weather as we go. Clear us for takeoff," ATC is going to immediately ground that plane. It is too reckless.
Naturally.
But if that pilot files a highly rigorous flight plan detailing exactly how much reserve fuel they are carrying, what their exact altitude will be, and pre-mapping 3 alternate emergency landing strips in case they encounter a severe storm system.
They've anticipated the risks.
Yes, ATC clears them immediately. Not because the storm doesn't exist, but because the pilot has mathematically proven they know exactly how to survive it. Investors are the air traffic control for construction capital.
That is an excellent framework for understanding institutional risk tolerance. Capital allocators do not fear risk. They understand that risk is the premium they get paid for.
Right, that's how they make their money.
Exactly. What they fear is unquantified, unmanaged risk. They expect supply chain issues, they expect bad weather. But when a development firm approaches a syndicate of banks and presents a matrix detailing the top 50 critical threats to the project,
they lay it all out.
Yes, alongside fully costed, pre-planned mitigation strategies for every single one of them. The perceived risk profile of the investment drops dramatically. It signals intense operational maturity.
So the bank is less anxious.
The bank feels very secure. And because the perceived risk is lower, they might offer a lower interest rate on the construction loan, saving the project millions in debt servicing before a single shovel even hits the dirt. It transforms the contractor from a speculative gamble into a heavily fortified, trusted partner.
Trust is the ultimate currency here, and it bridges perfectly to the final points the author makes regarding value creation, promoting absolute safety and facilitating flawless regulatory compliance.
Which also builds trust.
Exactly. The notes mention that the early, proactive identification of on-site hazardous materials allows the team to implement strict handling protocols immediately, which drastically reduces the statistical likelihood of safety incidents.
Proactive rather than reactive.
Right. Furthermore, a posture of continuous, proactive environmental audits keeps the project moving smoothly by completely eliminating the threat of governmental fines or certain site shutdowns.
If we synthesize all these points, the grand unifying theme is that elite risk management buys you trust across the entire ecosystem of the project.
It's all connected.
It buys you trust from your workforce, who physically see that leadership is investing capital to protect their lives and health. It buys you trust from municipal and federal regulators, who see that you are aggressively policing your own environmental and safety compliance long before an inspector ever sets foot on the site.
And from the investors, like we said.
Exactly, and from the capital markets.
Right.
That level of comprehensive trust drastically reduces the friction of doing business.
It is the ultimate flex for a commercial enterprise. So we have thoroughly established what the risks are, and we understand why mastering them is a corporate superpower.
Now for the application.
Yes, now we arrive at the practical execution. How does a 30-year industry veteran actually implement this massive theoretical strategy on the muddy ground, day in and day out? The author provides a very highly structured, 5-step blueprint for implementation.
I think we need to dissect this framework because this is where the theory actually hits the pavement.
Absolutely, and it begins with steps 1 and 2. Risk identification and risk assessment.
Right. And for step 1, identification, the author is adamant that this cannot be done in a silo. You cannot have one manager sitting in a dark office guessing at the risks.
That's how things get missed.
Precisely. The notes stress the absolute necessity of structured brainstorming workshops right at the inception of the project. You get the architects, the structural engineers, the main subcontractors, the legal team, and the financial officers all in one room.
Everyone has a voice.
Yes. They conduct a massive download of every conceivable threat, from a localized concrete shortage to an unexpected labor strike to historical weather patterns, and they document every single item into what they call a risk register.
Okay, so a risk register, that's step 1.
The risk register is the foundational document of the entire framework. It is essentially the master ledger of every anxiety and potential catastrophe facing the bill.
Right.
But the psychological brilliance of the register is that once a vague fear is documented on paper, it ceases to be an emotional anxiety and becomes a highly specific, manageable data point.
But if you brainstorm 100 different ways the project can die, that just sounds completely overwhelming now, which is why step 2 is so critical.
Assessment.
You have to prioritize.
Exactly. You have to evaluate the specific likelihood and the potential impact of every single risk on that master ledger. And to do this, the author introduces a tool called the risk matrix.
A very powerful tool. They use the example of a major equipment failure, like the primary tower crane, suffering a catastrophic mechanical breakdown. That specific event would be categorized as having a high likelihood and a severe impact, so it demands immediate prioritization. Can you break down the mechanics of how this matrix actually functions in practice?
Certainly. The risk matrix is a fundamental tool for triage. Imagine a simple two-dimensional grid. The vertical axis represents likelihood or probability. How statistically probable is it that this specific event will actually occur during our timeline?
Okay, likelihood on the vertical.
We can grade that as low, medium, or high. The horizontal axis represents impact or severity if this event does occur. How much financial or temporal damage will it inflict on the master schedule? Again, graded as low, medium, or high.
So you are basically plotting coordinates based on probability and pain.
Exactly. You take every single item from your exhaustive risk register and you plot it onto this grid. Let's say one risk is a delayed shipment of specialized office paint for the interior trim.
Okay, paint delay.
The likelihood of a shipping delay is quite high, but the impact is incredibly low because interior paint is not on the critical path. We can easily shift the painters to another task, so that risk is plotted in the bottom right corner.
Easy to manage.
Right. But let's look at the failure of the main tower crane. The likelihood of a mechanical issue over a 2-year build might be medium. but the impact is absolute, catastrophic high. The whole site stops. If the green stops, the entire vertical progress of the skyscraper stops. That risk is plotted in the top right quadrant, the critical red zone. The matrix visually forces the management team to see their priorities, dictating exactly where they need to deploy their capital and mental bandwidth.
It cuts through the noise so you aren't wasting time worrying about paint when you should be inspecting the crane. Okay, so once you have plotted your matrix and you clearly see your critical red zone, you move to step 3, developing risk mitigation plans.
Or, as the author categorizes them, the 4 responses.
Right, the 4 responses. When you are staring down a documented risk, you have 4 strategic options. You can mitigate it, transfer it, accept it, or avoid it entirely.
Let's break those down.
The notes offer the example of adverse weather patterns. You mitigate that risk by having temporary weather enclosures pre-staged on-site, or by developing alternate interior work schedules that can be activated the moment the forecast shifts.
Correct. Mitigation is the act of actively deploying resources to reduce either the likelihood of the event occurring or the severity of its impact.
And transferring.
Transferring a risk usually involves financial engineering, such as purchasing comprehensive insurance policies, thereby shifting the financial burden of a catastrophe onto a third-party underwriter.
And avoiding.
Avoiding a risk is the most extreme response. It involves fundamentally altering the project design or the scope of work so that the specific risk is entirely engineered out of existence.
Okay, I follow all of that. It makes perfect sense. But I have to severely push back on one of these responses, accept.
Acceptance.
Yeah.
I thought you might.
The author states that for certain risks, the appropriate management strategy is to simply accept them. Now, wait a minute. If you are a 30-year veteran, a highly paid master of logistics running a $50 million build, why on earth would your professional strategy ever be to just look at a risk, throw your hands in the air and say, okay, fine, I accept this?
It sounds a bit counterintuitive.
Isn't that just a fancy way of giving up?
I understand why it sounds like a surrender, but in the realm of advanced project management, accepting a risk is actually the result of a deeply mature, highly calculated cost-benefit analysis. It's a critical concept regarding the finite nature of resources.
Okay, walk me through the math on that. How does accepting failure make financial sense?
Let's return to your risk matrix. Down in the bottom left corner, you have a cluster of risks that are classified as extremely low likelihood and extremely low impact.
The minor stuff.
Right. For instance, the risk that a minor cosmetic scuff mark occurs on the casing of a non-essential piece of rental equipment. Now, you could theoretically choose to mitigate that risk. You could mitigate it by hiring a dedicated, full-time security guard to stand next to that specific piece of equipment 24 hours a day to ensure no one bumps into it.
But paying a guy's salary for a year just to watch a generator would cost an absolute fortune. It would ruin the budget.
Precisely. The financial cost of mitigating the risk is exponentially higher than simply paying the $100 penalty fee to the rental company if the equipment actually gets scuffed.
Ah, I see.
Acceptance is the pragmatic recognition that we operate in a reality with finite capital and finite time. If you attempt to proactively eliminate every single microscopic risk on a massive construction site, you will bankrupt the project through the sheer cost of your own mitigation strategies long before any actual disasters strike.
That makes total sense.
You strategically accept the minor, survivable bumps so that you preserve your capital and your resources to aggressively fight the major threats in the red zone.
Wow, okay. That is a profound shift in perspective. You don't spend $1 million building a titanium vault just to protect a 10-rupee coin. The cure cannot be worse than the disease. Brilliant.
It's all about allocation.
Okay, let's examine the final pieces of the blueprint. Step 4, continuous monitoring, and Step 5, communication. The author is fiercely adamant about this phase. They state explicitly that risk management is absolutely not a one-time performative paper exercise.
The binder on a shelf phenomena.
Yes, you do not just host a workshop, plot a beautiful risk matrix, put it in a leather binder, and leave it on a shelf in the site office.
The binder on a shelf phenomenon is the graveyard of good intentions in corporate project management.
Exactly. The notes insist on the necessity of regularly scheduled risk assessment meetings to continuously stay vigilant and actively adapt the matrix in real time based on the fluid status of the project. Because logically, the risks you face on day 1 of a build are fundamentally different from the risks you face on day 300.
A risk matrix must be treated as a living, breathing document. As the physical structure evolves, the threat landscape shifts entirely.
Give me an example of that shift.
Once the structural steel is topped out and the tower crane is dismantled, the risk of a catastrophic crane failure completely disappears from the matrix.
Right, because the crane is gone.
Exactly. But now, the project has entered the delicate interior finishing phase, meaning the risk of massive financial damage from a minor internal water leak skyrockets.
Because there's expensive drywall and flooring now.
Precisely. If the management team is not continuously monitoring and recalibrating the matrix to reflect the current physical reality, they are fighting yesterday's war.
And that required agility ties perfectly into the final step of the blueprint: communication. The notes stress the importance of fostering frictionless, open communication among all project stakeholders.
Which is easier said than done.
True, but the author goes beyond just having weekly meetings. They specifically highlight the critical importance of implementing a digital platform for real-time risk reporting. They advocate for a digital ecosystem where absolutely any team member, regardless of rank, can report a potential risk or a safety concern instantaneously from their phone.
This is arguably the most modern and potentially the most vital operational advice in the entire document. Implementing a frictionless digital reporting platform fundamentally democratizes the safety and risk architecture of the entire site.
Democratizes it.
Yeah.
I want to make sure I grasp the mechanics of that. How does an app change the hierarchy?
Historically, risk management was a strictly top-down, centralized process. It lived entirely in the site manager's trailer.
The guys in the suits.
Right. But the site manager, sitting behind a desk reviewing schedules, is not the individual physically standing on a leading edge of the scaffolding or down in the mud of the foundation trenches.
The laborers are.
The laborers and the specialized subcontractors are. By empowering every single worker with a simple digital tool, an app on their personal smartphone that allows them to instantly photograph and flag a compromised structural support, a frayed electrical cable, or even a subcontractor operating machinery erratically, you decentralize the observation process.
You give everyone a voice.
You take risk management out of the isolated office and place it directly into the hands of hundreds of active frontline observers. You effectively transform your entire workforce into a massive, real-time sensory network, constantly feeding crucial granular data back into your continuous monitoring loop.
That is an incredibly powerful concept. It means you aren't just relying on one safety officer doing a walkthrough once a day. You have 300 pairs of eyes actively crowdsourcing the security of the project.
It scales safety exponentially.
And it requires building a psychological environment where a junior worker feels totally safe reporting an issue without fear of retaliation from a senior foreman. It means every single person on that site fundamentally owns the safety of the project.
Exactly. It's a culture shift.
So as we pull all of these threads together and wrap up this incredibly dense deep dive into the notebooks of a true industry veteran, the ultimate takeaway is overwhelmingly clear to me.
What's your main takeaway?
Risk management in the world of high-stakes construction is not just a best practice. It is certainly not just an administrative corporate buzzword used to appease insurance adjusters. It is an absolute existential necessity.
It is the singular mechanism that allows a complex organization to survive and ultimately master the inherent daily chaos of building a massive physical structure.
It represents the vital evolution from a culture of merely crossing your fingers, pouring the concrete, and hoping for the best, to actively architecting a highly resilient, mathematically sound framework.
A proactive stance.
A framework that guarantees you can actually deliver the multi-million-dollar project you promised, regardless of what the market, the subcontractors, or the weather throws at you. So what does this all mean for us, sitting outside the construction fence?
It's a good question.
It means that genuine planning isn't just about dreaming up the perfect, sunny, best-case scenario. It is about rigorously, unsentimentally preparing for the absolute worst-case scenario and having a precise, pre-calculated strategy to defeat it.
Which leaves us with a truly fascinating parallel to consider here.
Oh.
We have spent this entire deep dive rigorously analyzing how massive commercial construction projects endeavors involving tens of millions of dollars, thousands of tons of raw steel, and the daily safety of hundreds of human lives rely entirely on constantly updating a complex risk matrix.
True.
We have seen how they actively anticipate severe disruptions, legally transfer liabilities, and intentionally bake contingency days into their master schedules to absorb the shocks of reality. It is the absolute gold standard for executing a highly complex multi-year goal.
Right.
So this raises a rather profound question. Why do we so rarely apply this level of rigorous analytical preparation to our own complex personal or career goals?
Wow, that is a great point.
We routinely embark on massive life projects, executing a radical career pivot, launching a new business venture, or taking on a 30-year mortgage to buy a home. And we almost universally operate purely on the assumption of the best-case scenario.
We just hope it works out.
Yeah, exactly. So
Oh.
as you look at the major goals you're building in your own life, ask yourself, have you actively mapped out your own personal risk matrix?
Mm.
Are you proactively anticipating the inevitable weather delays and supply chain shocks in your own journey? Or are you just walking out the door every single morning looking up at the sky and simply hoping it doesn't rain?